The big names in the early rounds are what everyone wants to talk about. But we make our money around here in the later rounds. And every single year, there's some wide receivers that are drafted late in drafts that turn out to be league winners. So today, let's take a look at a few of those later round wide receivers, some of those guys that could carry us to some fantasy football championships in 2023. But I also want to challenge you to come win some of my money over on Underdog Fantasy. I mean, if you really think that you can beat me in some best ball drafts here this offseason, now is your time to put up or shut up. So head over to Underdog Fantasy right now, create a new account using the referral code HEADLINERS. Once you do so, we're going to match your deposit up to $100. Plus, I'm also going to give you a free 2023 fantasy football draft guide to help you dominate all the leagues you're in this season. But most importantly, you'll have a few bucks in your account, you can join some drafts against me, and we'll see if you can take my money. Now, once you got it all set up, there's links down below in the description of this video of live drafts for you to try to join now. First come, first serve, slow drafts, always a lot of fun. We've been doing them all off season. But just because it's July, don't wait. We got you covered with off-season drafts and then player pick'ems in season. Gonna have a lot of fun, gonna win some money here. You're not gonna take all my money this year. All right, you're not gonna do it. But okay, let's talk about some wide receivers in the later rounds. Some guys that are going outside the top 30 at their position that have an opportunity to way outproduce their ADP here this year and maybe become some late round league winners. And I've mentioned that this has happened here recently, right? In 2021, we saw it with a few guys. Deebo Samuel, he was drafted as wide receiver 36, finished as wide receiver 2. How about Hunter Renfrow? He went undrafted, finished as wide receiver 11. We had Michael Pittman drafted as wide receiver 45, and he finished as wide receiver 15. And then Jalen Waddle, drafted as wide receiver 46, finished as wide receiver 16. But it happened last year as well. Amon-Ra, drafted at wide receiver 31, finished at wide receiver 8. Devontae Smith, drafted at wide receiver 35, finished as wide receiver 10. Brandon Ayuk, drafted as wide receiver 37, finished at wide receiver 15. And then Christian Kirk, drafted at wide receiver 40, finished at wide receiver 11. So as you can see, the bulk of these guys are somewhere in that wide receiver 30 to 40 range or so. So that's kind of what we're going to look at here today. I'm also going to take these guys that we talk about in this show and rank them at the end of the show. So make sure you stay tuned. But first, like I said, let's take a look through some of these guys sitting in that wide receiver 30 to 40 range, maybe a couple bonus guys I'll throw in there. We'll talk about each of them quickly, rank them at the end. The first one up right now, wide receiver 30, Michael Pittman of the Indianapolis Colts. Has a new quarterback now in Anthony Richardson. A new head coach in Shane Steichen over from Philadelphia. Some new weapons in that offense as well, right? They brought over Isaiah McKenzie from Buffalo. They also drafted wide receiver Josh Downs out of UNC. But Michael Pittman has averaged 1,000 yards and 5 touchdowns a year over the last 2 seasons. He's still the wide receiver 1 in an improved offense here in Indianapolis. He also has a top 15 finish under his belt. We talked about that a little bit earlier. The guy has wide receiver 1 traits. You're getting him at a good discount. You're not going to be overly reliant upon him. And if Anthony Richardson really does take that step forward, Michael Pittman could be one of the main beneficiaries. What about wide receiver 31? It's Deontay Johnson of the Pittsburgh Steelers, a target hog over the last 3 straight years in Pittsburgh, right? Over 144 targets in each of the last 3 years. Now we have Kenny Pickett going into year 2. He started to show some improvement at the end of 2022 as well. But we also have George Pickens going into his 2nd year, and the Steelers did go out and bring in Allen Robinson here from the Rams this offseason. I know a lot of people hate Allen Robinson. They think he's washed, but he's still somebody there taking away targets. However, Deontay Johnson, another one of those guys that we've seen get a top 10 finish at the position in fantasy football before. We've seen the ceiling before. If the touchdowns return and the targets stay the same, once again, Deontay Johnson could be somebody that surprises a lot of people here this year. Wide receiver 32, it's Mike Evans, which is absolutely crazy to think about Mike Evans being this low in the consensus rankings, but last year's struggles with Tom Brady, and now we're going to, Baker Mayfield, Kyle Trask. People are starting to freak out. We know Mike Evans has 9 straight seasons of 1,000 yards receiving. He has multiple top 10 finishes in fantasy football. He's the #1 deep threat on his team. He's the #1 red zone option on his team, and he's also on a team that's going to continue to have to throw the ball a lot in 2023. Mike Evans, we know, has that crazy high ceiling, just a little bit more risk this year than what we've seen in years past. Which will then take us to Marquise Hollywood Brown in Arizona, wide receiver 33. As a Cardinals fan, I'm still dead inside. I'm looking for a new fandom to join at this point because call me crazy, but I don't see the writing on the wall for a good year from Hollywood Brown. Sure, DeAndre Hopkins is gone, but that just means more defensive attention going the way of Marquise Brown. Plus, we know Kyler Murray may not be 100% healthy until mid-season. There's already rumors out there of the Cardinals starting 5th-round rookie quarterback Clayton Tune. Dear Lord. My season, it's already over. I can see a lot of checkdowns going the way of James Conner, Rondale Moore, and Greg Dortch, and really more boomer bust weeks going the way of Hollywood Brown. What about wide receiver 34? It's Treylon Burks of Tennessee. There are so many targets available there in Tennessee as of right now, and really no one else to demand any of them outside of Treylon Burks. Yet, because at the time of this recording, DeAndre Hopkins is still in play for the Tennessee Titans. And if he signs there, he's going to eat into this ceiling a lot. Plus, Treylon Burks isn't exactly an Iron Man out there. He needs to stay on the field and he needs to stay healthy. I'm not worried about a quarterback change. Both Ryan Tannehill, Will Levis can get the ball downfield to Burks as long as he's on the field. But once again, if DeAndre Hopkins signs there, it's not great news for Treylon Burks, which will then lead us to DeAndre Hopkins because he's currently at wide receiver 35 and unsigned at the time of this recording. Now, there's rumors of him going to New England or to Tennessee. But really, it doesn't matter where he goes because no matter where he signs, he's going to be a factor in that offense and he's going to be force-fed targets. This guy has already proven in the NFL that he can perform with some random quarterbacks. We saw it in Houston almost every single year prior to Deshaun Watson. He could easily be a huge factor on any team that he goes to, and really at the price at which you can get him on draft day right now, huge discount. DeAndre Hopkins is going to be a factor in 2023. Wide receiver 36 is Jahan Dotson going into his second year now in the NFL. Has a new quarterback, more than likely going to be Sam Howell. If not, it'll be Jacoby Brissett. Either way, probably an improvement from what he had last year from Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke. So we can look at Jahan Dotson as somebody who's going to have an opportunity in an upgraded passing game, right? Can't get any worse than what it was last year. The top defensive attention still going the way of Terry McLaurin. Jahan Dotson, a big play wide receiver. What about wide receiver 37? It's George Pickens of the Steelers. You just have to think that the Steelers are going to make a more conscious effort of getting George Pickens more touches, not just 50-50 deep balls that he has to make miracle catches with. This guy could be a top NFL wide receiver if he could just get consistent, high quality volume. Now, we mentioned earlier that Pittsburgh also brought over Allen Robinson, Deontay Johnson still there, Najee in the backfield. We know they want to run a little bit more, and none of that overly helps George Pickens, but he is still a solid wide receiver, and if for whatever reason this dude could flirt with 140 targets, he could make some fantasy noise. What about wide receiver 38, Jordan Addison out of Minnesota? I spoke about him earlier in the week. I love the landing spot for him in Minnesota because there's immediate targets up for grabs. There's no more Adam Thielen. And they just let Dalvin Cook go and spend a first-round draft pick on a wide receiver because they want to use him. Minnesota is already one of the highest passing volume teams in the NFL, and there's no reason why they won't be that again. I can see Jordan Addison being a sneaky wide receiver too here in 2023. What about wide receiver 39? It's Kadarius Toney. And it's always a what if with Kadarius Toney, right? And most of it has to do with his health, because this dude just can't stay on the field. But could you imagine if he played in all 17 games as one of the main weapons in a Patrick Mahomes-led offense? The numbers could be absolutely league winning. No more Juju, no more Hardman. Could mean a lot of Kadarius Toney if he can stay healthy. What about wide receiver 40? It's Jackson Smith-Njigba, JSN out of Seattle. One of my favorite wide receivers in the draft, but honestly, I hated this landing spot from a fantasy perspective. The team already has 2 established wide receiver studs in DK Metcalf and in Tyler Lockett. They have a top-tier running back in Kenneth Walker, and then drafted a solid backup there in Zach Charbonnet. Hey, I love the backfield overall for Seattle. So how much volume do we really see going the way of JSN every single week? Sure, we could see some big games from time to time if he scores a touchdown, but really, we're only going to benefit from him season long if we lose DK Metcalf or Tyler Lockett to an injury. If that happens, the numbers could be huge. So those were the wide receivers in that 30 to 40 range, but there are two guys that I circled outside the top 40 that I need to make sure we talk about. And the first one is Michael Thomas, who's sitting at wide receiver 48. And if you've watched this channel for any length of time, you know that I am not a Michael Thomas truther. But what if, again, what if he stays healthy? What if the change in quarterbacks to Derek Carr is the actual answer for Michael Thomas? What if Alvin Kamara is suspended? This guy has already proven at times in his career that he is one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. If healthy, could he be that again with Derek Carr? He has that opportunity. The reason he's so low, we ain't seen the guy do anything since like we ain't seen him do anything pre-COVID, and that seems like forever ago. But then there's also Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions, who's sitting at wide receiver 50. And you're only going to have him for half the fantasy football season due to the suspension to start the year. But at least he's going to be available for you in the half of the season that determines whether or not you go to the fantasy playoffs. Do not forget about the talent of Jameson Williams. He is a former first-round pick who was arguably the best wide receiver in college his last year in Alabama. Detroit is also one of the top offenses in the NFL, and his only competition for wide receiver 2 targets there is between him and an aging Marvin Jones Jr. This dude is a big play waiting to happen and could definitely help your fantasy football team's second half of the season. My biggest concern with Jameson Williams drafters is that you're going to be kind of somewhat reliant on him. I'm looking at Jameson Williams as more of a luxury this year. If you drafted some solid studs at the wide receiver position and you can afford to have a spot that's just sitting there and tied up for multiple weeks, that's when I want Jameson Williams. If you're a little thin at wide receiver, I don't know if I'm going to draft a guy who's going to be suspended the first half of the fantasy season. But now comes the fun part. Let's rank these guys. But when ranking these guys, you have to look at it from a different perspective. I'm not going to rank these guys the same way in this show like I would normally rank in typical draft rankings. This video is about that league-winning potential. It's late in the draft. If I don't feel good about my current wide receivers on my roster, who do I need to shoot my shot on to try to land a guy that could be a league winner? That's how I went ahead and made these rankings, and this is what I came up with. Right now, first off the board is DeAndre Hopkins. Like I said, no matter where he goes, he's going to put up some numbers. Michael Thomas, second. Could be a shock for a lot of people, but if he's healthy in this offense and we don't have Kamara for a few weeks, we've seen big numbers before in that scenario. Treylon Burks, as of right now, at the time of this recording, huge target share. You can't score points if you're not getting targets, and until DeAndre Hopkins signs somewhere, Treylon Burks is going to be close to the top of this list. Then we have George Pickens. I love George Pickens. I want George Pickens to be the guy in Pittsburgh, and he has the opportunity to be that. Maybe they have Allen Robinson there as a little bit more of a decoy role. They brought Pickens along slowly last year. They helped develop Kenny Pickett. We saw him turn the corner late in the season, and now they unleashed George Pickens. That's why I got him at number 4. Then we have Jameson Williams. I love that second half potential. Kadarius Toney. If the dude could stay healthy, he'd probably be in the top 2 or 3 on this list. We just haven't ever seen it. Mike Evans, I wish he had better quarterback play. Michael Pittman is here. Honestly, I think Michael Pittman is a solid wide receiver still. Do I look at him as more of like a league-winning guy? Honestly, not really. I kind of think that him and Deontay Johnson, a little bit similar there, is the fact that, hey, maybe you just need some added depth that you can count on weekly. Those are those guys. Are they going to produce at a league-winning level? Maybe not. Then we had Jordan Addison, followed by Jahan Dotson. Really kind of unknown what kind of volume those guys are going to get in a differing offense now for their teams. JSN, like I said, too much to go around, too much to split with in Seattle as of right now, needs an injury to happen. And then lastly, maybe it's just my dislike for my own team right now. It's Marquise Hollywood Brown, but I'm not overly interested in a deep threat wide receiver that could be having a third-string, fifth-round rookie quarterback throwing him the football to start the year. It's not exactly what I'm looking for in fantasy football. But are there any names in the list that we covered here today that really caught your attention as maybe one of those guys that could finish inside the top 10, the top 15, the top 20 at the position and really outperform their ADP? Be sure to leave those comments down below so we can communicate back and forth. We need to find who are these guys going to be, because we all trying to win some championships up around here. Make sure you do me a favor though, hit the like button if you haven't already. Consider subscribing if you're new to the channel, because we have all types of fun content here around the game of fantasy football, and the community is second to none. But for now, I'm gonna get out of here for the day. Hopefully you have a great rest of your day and do your part to make the world a better place.